As I hope you know, our Lenten theme is things to remember. We're just looking at things in our faith that are just worth reminding ourselves that they're part of the faith. And so today I thought we would take a line out of St. Paul's letter to the church at Philippi. And he reminds us that we are citizens of heaven. You and I, we are citizens of heaven. We are not citizens of this culture that we're in. That sounds simple enough, but of course, like so many things in our faith, it's worth looking at. What does that mean for you and I to be citizens of heaven? There are lots of ways to look at it, but maybe a simple one, a practical one, is to look at it in terms of our actions. What do you and I do? What does it mean for us in our actions, our words, to be citizens of heaven? Maybe a great way to start is to tell you something about the Roman army. I didn't know this until a week ago, but evidently, if you served in the armies of Rome for 21 years, and then, if you will, I guess, retired, you got two things. First, they made you a Roman citizen, which was a big deal. And then they gave you some land or some opportunity in one of the provinces. Rome, especially at the time of Jesus, spread way out. And so they would send you out to live in one of these provinces. You were a citizen of Rome. You didn't live in Rome, but you were a citizen. And that meant that what these guys did out in the province, they dressed like a Roman, they acted like a Roman, they took with them all the customs of Rome. And so therefore, they lived out their citizenship. And that's a great way for you and I think, to think of this idea of you and I being citizens of heaven. We're called, if you will, because we're citizens, to act like we belong to Christ. Or to put it differently, we just need to act like we are disciples of Christ. And if it would help you to put some real practical application onto that, if you'll allow me, let me remind you of something that we as a congregation went through a couple years ago. Some of you will, I hope, remember this. Matthew Kelly's group, Dynamic Catholic, did some research. They were trying to figure out what is it that makes a committed Christian, a committed disciple of Christ. What are the characteristics? Or for us, it's asking the same question as, what does it mean to be a citizen of heaven? And they, in their research, found that there were 4 things that seemed to matter, 4 things that were common to citizens of heaven. First was that they had a life of prayer, about 15 minutes a day in prayer. Not necessarily all at the same time, maybe spread out over the day, but about 15 minutes in prayer, which certainly makes a lot of sense. Hard to be a citizen of heaven if you're not willing to communicate with the Lord. The second attribute they found was that a disciple of Christ, a citizen of heaven, wanted to learn more about their faith. And so they would spend, on average, about an hour and a half every week doing something to learn about their faith. That might be attending a Bible study or a small group. That might be watching some sort of video, say, on our Formed subscription. It might be reading a book, whether that was high, theology, or maybe, kind of just a simple, devotional sort of book. But about 90 minutes, they found, seemed to be what citizens of heaven, disciples of Christ, would do. They found that those people also understood stewardship. They were good stewards. In other words, being a citizen of heaven means that you understand that everything comes from God. Our time, our talent, our treasure, all of it. It all comes from God, and that you and I are called to take care of it, to be good stewards of it, to ask the question, what's the best use of my time? What's the best use of my talent? And yes, what's the best use of my money? If you'll allow me a shameless plug at this point, if you're looking for a way to do a little stewardship, you might consider volunteering to help us with the festival. That thing works because so many people chip in, and we don't need too many people to work days and days and days. We just really need a bunch of people to work a few hours of the time. And so if you perhaps might think, well, would it be a good use of my time to give 2-3 hours to the festival? You know, selling tickets, selling food, whatever it happens to be. And I would like to think that that might be a real possibility for many of you. And if you did that, you would also have a leg up, if you will, on the fourth thing that they found that citizens of heaven do, and that is they're evangelists. Which is tough for some people because they don't think, well, how can I be an evangelist? We're not all called to preach. We're not all called to be missionaries. We're called in our own ways. And I can assure you that working a couple hours of the festival is possibly, likely, an act of evangelization on your part. Because if you know, in working, if you treat people well, you will be evangelizing. Because you have to remember that a lot, maybe the majority of the people that come to our festival don't belong to this parish. They don't belong to any church. They didn't have to worry about getting up an hour early. They're still sleeping. And the idea here is that if they come on our campus, and then if they come, yeah, that's a good seat over there for you, thanks. No, it's quite all right. If they come on our campus and they encounter you and you treat them well and you smile at them and you welcome them and you serve them well, well then, who knows, a week from now, a year from now, 3 years from now, they come to that moment, as many of us have, where it's like, well, maybe it's time to think about church. And they'll remember this place, because here's a place where they were treated well, and they'll show up. Those four things: prayer, learning about the faith, being a good steward, being an evangelist. Those are characteristics of being a citizen of heaven. I want to close with just one other thing. For some of you, that list, that's easy. You already do a lot of that. And for some of us, maybe we're pretty good about a lot of it, could use some improvement. So that's fine. That's just good encouragement for us. But there are possibly some people here who are looking at that list and going, that list is too long. I'm never going to be able to do all that. Because it sure seems like you're giving up a lot of time. 15 minutes a day, an hour and a half a week. I still got to give some of my time in some other ways while I'm too busy. I don't have that kind of time. I just want to encourage you along those lines, and if you allow me to do that by an analogy. Many of you know that when I was in seminary, I got the terrific opportunity to do some hiking and climbing in the mountains of New England. And any time that Brian, my partner, and I did this, my climbing partner, there were 4 rough moments in every day. The first was getting up, because we had to get up at 3:30 in the morning, and that was not easy. But the second one was once we had driven up into the mountains and we got to the trailhead, we had to get out of the car, because this was winter, and it was warm in the car, and it was crazy cold outside. And so it was necessary that you had to sort of take a deep breath and go like, okay, we're going to do this, and get out and get the gear on and take off. But I'll tell you this, the first couple miles was always easy. The issue was you just had to get started. And yes, it did get harder after that. Sometimes, you know, depending on on the mountain, whatever, things got a little tricky on the way up. Sometimes just because we were crazy tired, it got tricky on the way down. But getting started wasn't that hard. And so if you're looking at this list of these 4 things and going like, I don't know, that sounds like a lot, I just need to encourage you, just start. Just start someplace. Volunteer at the festival, just start a little bit of prayer. If you can't do 15 minutes a day, just start someplace. Just start. Because you just want to get on that road. You just want to start walking. You just want to start becoming a citizen of heaven. Because there are lots of people in here that will tell you the same thing I will tell you. You got a choice between being a citizen of heaven and a citizen of our culture. There is no choice. You do not want to be a citizen of our culture. You want to be a citizen of heaven.